Hi there. Welcome to episode 2 of the AtroKraft Satisfactory Megabase project. In the last episode, we introduced our series, pushed into phase 2 by completing our first space elevator requirements, and finally we got coal power online over the rocky desert lake, securing the energy we need to push forward. We're turning our attention now to one of the most important builds in the entire series, the supplies factory. This is where we'll centralize and store every construction material that we need, from the basics like plates and rods up through steel beams and encased beams. It's not flashy, but it's the backbone of everything that comes after. Skip this step at your own hazard, as without it, expansion will be slow and painful. For example, building the coal plant required at least 6 trips back to our temporary setup to retrieve supplies, switch productions, and handcraft. This will kill motivation and drive progress to a halt, but today we are ending all of that. Before breaking ground, I want to step back and look at the plan in Satisfactory Modeler. This is where the factory really begins, not in game, but on paper. The goal isn't to throw down machines and hope for the best. It's to make sure the ratios line up so every line runs smoothly. The model lays out how much ore comes in, how many smelters and constructors we need to balance it, and how those outputs flow into the next tier. That way, we avoid machines sitting idle half the time or assemblers starving down the line. Everything scales together cleanly. Now, the per minute target we're aiming for here are really just guesstimates. The idea is to keep most requirements within the 120 items per minute limit of the Mark II belt, which is our fastest belt at this stage. Some items, like screws, blow past that, upwards of 750 per minute total, so the plan is to split those across multiple belts, usually one belt per assembler, or one belt feeding 2 if the math works out. Don't stress if a line falls a little short or if a belt runs slightly over capacity. If you're hitting 90% efficiency or so, that's more than enough to keep things flowing, and anything you notice lagging later can always be upgraded. The beauty of this approach is, by sizing everything with belts and ratios in mind, the supplies factory isn't just solving the early game scramble. It's built to carry us cleanly into phase 4. From simple iron parts to steel and motors, every essential material is accounted for, and the math ensures it all stays balanced without guesswork. Now, the building that houses all this we will be placing immediately next to the existing starter factory, and it will be laid out in the same rectangular grid. It's designed at double the floor space and also integrates an extra floor, giving us plenty of room to grow. Right now, the focus is simply on creating as much usable floor space as possible, laying down a solid canvas for the factory to expand onto. The rule here is simple. The build fits inside the building, not the other way around. That keeps everything clean, modular, and expandable. Production blocks stay grouped and sized according to the math from the modeler, while the grid layout gives us the flexibility to expand without breaking symmetry. The result is a factory where every line has a purpose, every assembler pulls its full weight, and storage fills at a steady, predictable rate. That's what you gain by planning ahead. Not just efficiency on paper, but tangible results that you can see every time you walk inside. And what does that look like in practice? Rows of containers, quietly and endlessly filling themselves. The whole catalog of essentials, always topped off and ready. No more bouncing back to temporary setups, swapping recipes, or handcrafting a few stacks just to move forward. Everything has a permanent home, and every container refills itself as you use it. It may not be super flashy, but this is what keeps the whole project moving forward. From here on out, progress is no longer defined by whether we can find enough screws or stop mid-build to make more plates. Instead, it's defined by how far we want to push the vision, because the factory itself takes care of all the basics. Now, with the supplies factory online and the basics secured, we're almost ready to push into phase 3. But before we can really take that step, there's one more critical job: gathering alternate recipes, and that means a lengthy quest for hard drives. Hard drives are the lifeblood of efficiency in Satisfactory. The base recipes will only carry you so far. But once you start slotting in the right alternates, entire production lines tighten up, bottlenecks ease, and suddenly you're getting more out of the same resources. To get there, we set out across the map, hunting down crash sites, clearing enemies, and hauling back every hard drive we can find. Along the way, we're putting together a couple of temporary setups, one pulling in SAM ore and another tapping into quartz. Neither are permanent yet, but they're stepping stones. SAM feeds directly into the MAM for research, while quartz unlocks a whole branch of tech that will eventually tie into oscillators, communications, and later electronics. At the same time, we're pushing every unlock we can through the MAM and the Awesome Shop. The MAM gives us recipes, alternates, and new research paths, while the Awesome Shop fills in the quality of life upgrades, foundations, walls, logistics options that make every build cleaner and faster. Piece by piece, we're stacking up the infrastructure and the knowledge we'll need to break into Phase 3 without stalling. With a handful of new recipes in place, it was time to tackle the next milestone, building the factory for our Phase 3 space elevator parts. This build covers two of the big three, versatile framework and automated wiring, since smart plating had already been running in the background and was finished by the time we got here. As with the supplies factory, we worked this one out first in Satisfactory Modeler. On screen you can see the rough plan we used as a guide. The per minute targets were set by dividing the elevator's final requirements by 100, just like we went over back in episode 1. That gave us a clear set of numbers to design towards. Because our local copper nodes were already overtapped feeding the supplies factory, we pulled in Caterium as our copper substitute. Likewise, instead of drawing more from the existing iron lines, we reached north to the peninsula and dedicated that ore strictly to this build. Keeping the resource streams separate made sure the supplies factory stayed unaffected while we layered on this new project. In practice, most of the work came down to versatile framework. Since it is so steel heavy, we built a full row of foundries down by the coal plant and dedicated them to cranking out beams and pipes. Once that block was in place, more than half the job was already done. Hooking up the remaining assemblers for automated wiring and tying everything into buffers was just the finishing touch. By the end, the Phase 3 factory was fully constructed, its belts and machines in place, and its storage buffers are ready to be filled. But when it came time to flip the switch, there was an obvious problem. The power grid simply couldn't handle it. The coal plant at the rocky desert lake was already straining. Its belts and coal nodes stretched thin. Burners would starve, drop offline, and the power graph spiked constantly up and down. Running the new factory on top of that would be impossible. Before anything else can move forward, the new power situation has to be fixed. To stabilize it, the next step is unlocking compacted coal. By bringing in sulfur and combining it with our coal, we'll be able to produce a fuel that burns longer, stretching the limited coal we already have much farther. The same generators we already built will run more evenly and for longer stretches without starving. Of course, that's easier said than done. Sulfur is not exactly convenient to bring in. The closest source lies in the south of the northern forest, far from the coal plant, while the other is on the adjacent cliff in the Crater Lake biome, nearly 300 meters higher than the path we need to bring it through. Neither of them are plug-and-play resources. Both will need careful transport lines and some creative routing to bring in consistently. It's not just a question of distance, but elevation, terrain, and throughput. Still, the payoff is worth it. Once sulfur is flowing and compacted coal comes online, our generators run longer and far more evenly, smoothing out the constant spikes on the power graph. To push things even further, we'll begin slotting in power shards across the generator line. Even partial overclocking raises the baseline, edging us closer to the full design target of a 300 megawatt coal plant. Enough capacity not just to feed the supplies factory, but the expansions that will follow. Once all of that was in place, the difference was unmistakable. The jagged, unreliable graph we'd been dealing with flattened into a steady line. Power became predictable, dependable, no longer a bottleneck, but a foundation we could trust. With power finally under control, it's time to do the one thing we've been holding back on, turning on the Phase 3 factory. Smart plating was already complete from the earlier setup, so this moment is about bringing versatile framework and automated wiring online. The belts spin up, assemblers begin their cycles, and parts start flowing steadily into storage, a self-sustaining pipeline ready to feed the space elevator. Before we push the button, let's take a look at the big picture. On the uploaded map, you can see everything we've accomplished since the last episode. The starter hub, the new supplies factory, the upgraded coal plant, and now this fully operational Phase 3 production block. Piece by piece, the foundation of the Megabase is taking shape. And now the payoff. We load the parts into the space elevator, lock the clamps, and send them skyward. Phase 3 is complete. It's been great fun being able to move through a full phase each episode so far, but reality is setting in. From here on out, progress won't always fit neatly into a single recording. The scale of the project is growing, and each step forward will take more planning, more building, and more time. But that's exactly what makes the journey so exciting. The Megabase is no longer just an idea, it's something you can see taking form with every episode. So if you've enjoyed this ride so far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the Twitch streams if you want to see the builds come together live. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.